afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this session on navigating the cannabis industry, in Florida, medical cannabis industry. Appreciate you coming, and we're going to try to make this as informative as possible, but also provide some additional time for input. So I'm Jeff Sharkey with the Florida Medical Marijuana Business Association of Florida, and in Tallahassee we have an advocacy group that really is comprised of folks across the broad spectrum who have interests in this area. Started back in 2014, work on, no, yes? Okay, Jane? To really, as many of you heard before, when these very kind of courageous, very conservative legislators really heard from parents with kids who were really sick with epilepsy, decided to really take the big step in drafting the low THC cannabis bill, national care bill. It was clear that there was a lot of different voices in this space, as you well know, from all over the country. In Florida, people have been advocates for many, many years in different areas of cannabis. Some really focused on the medical conditions, physicians, and the cannabinoid system researchers, all the way to folks who are really passionate about recreational cannabis, free the plant, right? To hedge fund investors, to people on the business side of this. So what this association really was created to do was to bring together a lot of different kinds of stakeholders at the state level in Tallahassee, the capital, who had an interest. And that ranged from, again, a lot of those people, Jimmy James, Cannabis Coalition, Sheriff's Association, the Police Chiefs Association, even Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who had an affiliate group against drugs. We had the Just Say No on Drugs people involved. So what we would do is try to get them in the room and hammer out what would work, not only from a patient perspective, not only from a policy perspective, but really work, as this industry emerged. Because if you don't have a functioning business industry, then patients aren't going to get the products they need. It's not going to be tested. The quality control is not going to be there. So as they started out back in 2014 with the low THC, it had a lot of flaws in it. Some people thought they were doing it to preempt the amendment. The legislature was doing it to preempt the amendment in 2014. There was some fun with that. John Morgan was in the background banging away. And then so the legislature got involved, began to hear the stories from folks like you and others that what the value, what the benefits, what the efficacy of this plant medicine could do. So throughout that whole process for the last 4 years now, we've been working, the association's been working, really try to educate folks, provide information on business opportunities, but really as well across a broad range of areas. And there are lots in this space. If any of you have been to some of the big conferences, Marijuana Business Journal conferences, massive thousands and thousands of people. So you can sense that this industry across the country, both on the medical side and the rec side, is becoming a very maturing industry, right? It's becoming a significant industry with a lot of people in different areas that are trying to find opportunities. At the same time, you want to make sure that as this matures in Florida, and it's a very immature industry right now, as I've talked about, the folks who have the licenses, are really doing a great job, best they can. I was just talking to Kim Rivers with Truly. She said, you got to grow these plants, and it's very hard to meet the demands of patients when these plants take time. You can sing to them, you can charm them, but at the end of the day, you've got to not only grow it, cultivate it, process it, and then you got to distribute it. And so the logistics issues, the inventory management issues, and all the ancillary issues around that, are critical to ensure that we have a functioning system. So we've got some panelists here today that I'm going to introduce, and then I'll stop. But I think, as you all know, we have currently 13 MMTCs. They're vertically integrated. Some are really out in the marketplace with retail dispensaries. Some aren't. Some are still in cultivation mode. Some are just delivery. They've had license for several years. They're just delivering by car. So each one of those businesses is trying to figure out what's the best way to develop a product, develop a brand, really important, to get this out to patients without going bankrupt, right? In a cost-effective way. It's very, very expensive. so you've got a lot of mixture of people in different phases of the industry, and they're all trying to communicate with physicians, they're trying to communicate with patients, trying to develop a brand, get feedback, improve their brand, etc. So as part of that whole business model, part of what we try to do is identify some issues that we can help support and advocate for. One of those I mentioned before was really this getting big data on what works. There's got to be a system that will allow patients to provide feedback on their experience with a particular product, that physicians can understand that, I need to tailor my product to people with Parkinson's or cancer, or whatever the case may be. And then dispensaries can say, listen, my client, my customer list looks like this. I've got 22% that have this particular issue. I need to be developing a product that meets their needs. As I talked to Christian Bax with the Department of Health, I said, 3 years from now, you're going to be able to say what works. Is this program all anecdotal? Great testimonials from everybody, but what's the data say? Right? And that's where we got to drive this. Anyway, so other issues like banking, financial services, et cetera, are critically important, and these gentlemen are trying to address some of those issues. So let me stop my introduction and introduce by order. We have an overview of the Florida cannabis industry. Pete Sessick, most of you know Pete. He's the COO of the Florida Cannabis Coalition, and very active in advocacy and business development around the state. John Hardiman, who with General Counsel and EVP with Hyper, which is a financial services solution, banking solution for NFTCs. I had lots of conversations with their organization. And I'll tell you about what they're trying to accomplish, servicing, providing support for the financial transactions that are taking place at dispensaries. And then Carl Keisch, who's the executive director of the Canna Consulting Group, is going to talk about running a business and what it takes to do that. So unless I've misrepresented you entirely, Pete, why don't you come up, and Peter, why don't you come up and start it off. So we're gonna go for 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes, and then open it up for questions. Just get some interaction. Talk about it.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Pete, and 4 years ago, founded a company called Florida Cannabis Coalition, and we were one of the first cannabis companies in Florida. And the reason we did that is we felt that at the time, Florida was the frontier for the cannabis industry. So instead of looking at going out west, where things are more established, a lot of people are looking at coming out here because this is the second most populous state in the country. 6 million baby boomers who all accept cannabis as medicine, and we passed medical marijuana. Not at this time when we started the company, but we now passed medical marijuana by the highest margin for a ballot initiative in the country by 72%. So Florida was the place to be, and originally when we started the coalition, it was one of the main goals was to get Amendment 2 passed. And one of the things that we learned, something that we learned from the business world, because in my business partner Tom, both former executives, was that business is the greatest force for social change that we've ever seen. Whenever you see a big social change movement, businesses has traditionally supported that when that change starts to really take hold. So we've seen, for instance, we've seen the marijuana industry move, at pretty much a snail's pace until industry and business starts to get involved and put some money behind it and start seeing opportunities, and then we start seeing a lot more policy change. So that was one of the impetuses of the founding of the company, and now what we do is we educate and we bring together people that are in the industry, people that want to be in the industry, connect them. We do events kind of similar to this. We have one in Orlando coming up, but on a bigger scale than this. And then we do smaller events that network people together. But the greatest thing that we do is we educate people. We put out messages that people can take and tell their conservative grandparents to get them to accept cannabis as a medicine. People that come to our events and that we interact with become evangelists, and they go out and they speak about cannabis and they share their stories, and they're empowered, and you create an environment for them where it's not something to be ashamed of, and it's not something that fits those stereotypes that people have been fed over the years. So that's more or less what we do is we help people who want to get into this industry figure out exactly how to do that. And my background, I was a marketer for many, many years, and I found I had an attack of conscience there as a marketer. And what I put out into the world is I want something to be good. I want to put out something good into the world. And advertising in and of itself wasn't doing that for me, but I found something that actually is. And it's the same thing that's been helping me with my health for the past 20 years. And that's why this plan is so amazing, because it can do so much for us economically, environmentally, mentally, physically. It hits on all cylinders. And it's really important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about the cannabis business as well. It's not just about growing and selling cannabis. There's a whole other world of ancillary type products and services that actually are a bigger market than cannabis sales themselves. So you know that Florida is kind of a restrictive market now. It's not going to be that way forever. We're going to see federal movement. We're going to see state movement. You can plan for the future with your business. But it's restrictive now. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to be a grower. You don't have to be a distributor just yet. You can get there. So I don't want to take too much time. I know we have our panel to talk about, but that's basically what where I'm coming from, and I'll pass it on over to John.
Good afternoon. My name is John Hardiman. I'm going to talk about marijuana banking. I know in the last panel there seemed to be some very strong feelings about the terminology, cannabis, marijuana. I use the term marijuana not to make a point, only because that is the legal term, and that is the term that is used in relevant federal policy, which is what I will talk about as well. I'm currently working for a banking compliance software company in Scottsdale, Arizona, that works with financial institutions across the country to service the marijuana industry. I came about this quite accidentally. I was just minding my business. I was an attorney at the Department of Justice in 2014 when I got a rather unusual assignment, which was to draft federal policy that would entice banks to willingly service a federally illegal industry.
Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, sure. I'll just, I'll have that for you by lunch. So, just to give you a little bit of background as to how that even came about, in the previous panel we heard a real lot, about Florida law and the evolution of the Florida cannabis laws. But obviously, as we all know, this remains an illegal substance at the federal level. So while, yes, it's quite important as to know the relevant state laws, this is only possible. The only reason why any of us are even here is because it is being permitted by the federal government. So we need to understand how we even got to this place. And that's sort of how I got involved. And so I'm not going to give you the long history of federal policy, but things really came to a head in 2013. This was after Colorado had legalized recreational marijuana. And that was really the point of no return for the federal government. They either had to say, okay, we're going to put an end to this because it's in conflict with federal law. We're going to end this experiment, and we're going to start reinforcing federal marijuana laws. Or we're going to allow what is happening, but we're going to set up some parameters, some guidelines, some standards, so that if a state chooses to legalize marijuana, they will all be operating generally by the same rules. And that the federal government, the Department of Justice at that time decided they were going to do the latter. So in 2013, they issued a memo through the Department of Justice. So it was the Cole memo. It is named because it was released under the then Deputy Attorney General James Cole. And what it did was it laid out the rules for states, businesses, and individuals that got involved in state legalized marijuana and what they had to do in order to avoid enforcement, in order to avoid any federal enforcement. And they basically said two things. If you comply with state law, and you avoid doing one of 8 really bad things, you are basically in the clear. Those bad things include selling marijuana to minors, diverting the proceeds of marijuana commerce to drugs or cartels, diverting state legalized marijuana to states where it's not legal. DOJ effectively said, you don't do those things and you comply with state law, we're gonna leave you alone. And that really sort of was what really ignited the Colorado market and other states, and the industry really took off. The problem, however, with that memo is that it did not address the proceeds that is generated by marijuana commerce. Why is that a problem? Because under federal money laundering laws and federal Bank Secrecy Act laws, every transaction into or through a financial institution with the proceeds of marijuana commerce is money laundering. And just to underscore that point, the legalization of marijuana at the state level does nothing to change that. So again, every transaction that occurs in this state and every other state in which marijuana has been legalized that goes to a bank or a credit union, that's an act of money laundering. So here's what you had. You had on one hand the federal government saying, okay, we're going to allow this industry to operate. But on the other hand, you had banks and credit unions refusing to service the industry because they were rightly concerned that if they did, they would run afoul of federal money laundering laws. So what you saw, most notably in Colorado, was these businesses doing tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of business, all in cash, or primarily in cash, because again, these transactions are not authorized for credit cards. So most of these transactions operate in cash. So you have these businesses sitting on all this money and nowhere to put it. And the repercussions of that were fairly obvious, and you could see them almost immediately. Public safety, these became targets for crime. You had no transparency in this money. Where the hell was it going? Taxation, it is very hard to pay your taxes when you drive up to the relevant federal agency with duffel bags full of cash. And how the hell do you even know whether or not it's all the taxes that are owed? So the lack of banking access had real profound policy and public safety implications. So that's how I got involved in 2014 to say, okay, we need another piece of federal policy that is specifically aimed at the banking issue to say, banks, this is a permissible activity if you do it the right way. And so I was the primary author of the DOJ document that laid this out, and then the Department of the Treasury laid out similar guidance, which was much more detailed and specific. It was really sort of a how-to guide for banks and credit unions to service the industry. And so that guidance, the Treasury guidance, is still in effect to this day. It's still being adhered to. As you may know, the DOJ guidance, both the 2013 memo and the 2014 memo that I drafted, were rescinded in January of this year by Attorney General Sessions. I think initially there was a lot of concern that that was the opening salvo in a federal crackdown against state legalized marijuana. I think you can all see that that has not come to pass. And I think that that gesture by Sessions is looking more and more symbolic as opposed to substantive. But the issue, the underlying issue and problem that remains, banks and credit unions, notwithstanding this Treasury guidance that is out there that says this is a permissible activity, still remain incredibly reluctant to service this industry. So that is an ongoing problem. It's one that needs to be addressed because you simply cannot have a state legalized industry that is now, in the tens of billions and soon to be in the 20 and billions of dollars industry that is frozen out of the financial system. You just can't have it. And I think it's an issue that's getting increasing attention both at the state level and at the federal level. And as I said, I work for a company that is working with banks and credit unions to specifically service this industry because this is a vital issue that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Brings back a lot of flashbacks and a lot of memories. I got into the marijuana industry over 10 years ago. I founded the Seattle Medical Marijuana Association, and shortly after the Cole memo came out, that is when this industry really did start to evolve. I mean, just boom, gangbusters. I'd like to maybe share a little bit of my experience and then talk about how it can be relevant to you all today. But you know, every one of the things that these guys have talked about, you know, from this actually being medicine, this actually being something that works to help improve quality of people's lives. This is, you know, improving healthcare, this is providing jobs, this is providing tax revenue. There's so many awesome things about this industry. And there are a lot of challenges that we're all gonna have to overcome. It's, you know, part of the developing industry. When I first got into this, you know, there was flour. Edibles were, you know, some Rice Krispie treats or some brownies that you didn't know what the heck you were gonna get in a plastic bag. And, you know, there was no such thing as labs and dosing and, you know, microbial testing. And it's, you know, where we've come from medical to now where the state is starting to become involved in actually regulating this and becoming an industry. You know, you hear those words industry and business, and I think that that is what it's all about, you guys. This whole industry right here, I mean, the awesome thing is that, hey, this is something that is gonna be able to help improve the quality of people's lives. This is providing jobs, but what is important to us in the room and the regulators and everyone else, it's the money. And this is generating a lot of money for state governments, for federal government. Washington State, we have an excise tax, and that's 37% in addition to our sales tax. So that's 47% extra being chalked onto the price of the you know, medicine for patients. So now patients are being taxed on their medicine. It's one of the saddest things out there, you know. And we went from, you know, being able to help, you know, so many people with all these crazy conditions. I've seen cannabis work to heal everything. It works. It's a miracle plant. I mean, if traditional medicine doesn't work, try cannabis. And it's, you know, every one of us, yes, it works. We all know it works. And, you know, I think John Morgan said it. You know, you know, we passed the tipping point, is what he said. You know, we're at the point right now where more states are medical than not. We're at the point where there's this thing called social media, and you know, the word is out. This isn't a secret. Cannabis is helping to improve people's lives. When you see these little kids that, you know, are running around that are able to run and play that didn't have any kind of a quality of life, and that's because of whole plant cannabis. It's awesome. It's the stuff that works at heart, and you know, it's why I'm still in this crazy industry. I'm from Seattle. I had the opportunity to be there and to watch the industry evolve and to go from medical, where it was all about, you know, the patients, to okay, now we're getting transitioned into rec, and the priorities went from helping, you know, sick people, helping patients, to how am I gonna get a license? How am I gonna stay open? You know, and here in Florida, it's like, you know, 13 licenses. How do you get into this industry? You know, if you can't afford to get one of those licenses, and you see that this is working, you can go work for one of these companies, or you can start doing some CBD things yourself on the side. And again, there's so much of this stuff that is unproven scientifically, but empirical data shows us that this stuff works. And so sourcing is another big issue. You know, if you're going to have a CBD products, you know, the plants, the genetics that it's coming to. I mean, there's so many issues that are involved in the CBD industry. I don't really want to talk at you. I want to kind of, you know, be here so we can, you know, have a nice engaged panel discussion and answer the questions that are most relevant to you all. Can I get a show of hands of people here that are looking to get into the industry that are not in the industry yet? So we've got, wow, that's a lot of people that are, okay. And so about half and half. And so if you're looking to get in an industry, this is awesome. organizations like Pete's, it's amazing. I mean, I came down to Florida a couple of years ago with my wife and kids and fell in love with it down here. And I found out that I was able to run my dispensaries from down here because supply chain, we're not allowed to be vertically integrated in Washington State. And so all my headaches of growing the cannabis and extracting the cannabis, done it all, but those were all gone. I chose the retail path because I own my property and I wanted to make sure that I had a good tenant, and that was me. And so I just kind of stayed on the retail side of things. The Seattle Medical Marijuana Association, my former medical store, has now transitioned to the pot stop. And it just kills me every time I say pot stop. You know, it used to be so cool sound. It used to, sound so credible, and now it's just pot stop. Right? You want to go get some weed, there you go. There you go, pot stop. But that being said, I've been ranked #1 by Leafly in Washington State for the last year as far as customer reviews. We're 5 stars on Yelp. Google reviews are pretty darn close to 5 stars. But yeah, we're the best in the state on Leafly. And you go there and you read our reviews, and it's about the customer service, taking care of the customers. I mean, that's one of the biggest things, treating people like you like to be treated. If you can do that, that's half the key to success, and actually caring. And that's one of the things that we've been able to keep alive is our corporate culture. We are now running as the pot stop, but my manager, Jay, myself, we're still SMA, Seattle Medical Marijuana Association. That's who we are. We do a lot of political advocacy. I do consulting now on the side. I'm actually working with one of the Indian tribes in Washington State that they're starting to build. I mean, the industry keeps changing, guys. So I think probably you guys want to open up for questions, because I could go on and on and on and on, you guys, but I really want to value your guys' time and speak stuff that's relevant. And all of these things that you guys are going to go through, all these growing pains. I've got a lot of scars. Yeah. So I can share a lot of
Well, great. Listen, those are some excellent presentations from a diverse perspective on the industry. We'll take some questions. Yes, sir.
I'm Joshua Littrell, Veterans for Cannabis. So, it's a real issue with us because we're trying to bring veterans into this industry and teach them how to become small business and entrepreneurs, not only because getting in there, being able to affect policy change from the inside out comes from money, right? So you become wealthy, you gotta do that for the back of the community. But we're talking about the therapeutic benefits of actually growing the plant. So when we're talking about PTSD management and issues like that, growing that plant is really, really tremendous from us from a standpoint of recovery,
Yes.
okay? So there's nothing to really help us get into the industry, and that's a huge, huge gap that we're trying to fill, but we can't get funding because we've applied for the Small Business Association loans and things for the VA. Nothing will touch us in the cannabis industry. So there's nothing we can do to help a veteran get excited and get into the industry, not only as a working a counter. I don't want to just do that. I want to put these men and women that are high functioning, once were high functioning, back to work and make them high functioning again. That's what the objective is. So how can we do that as an industry?
Let me comment and then I'll open it up for folks. So we look at policy and department's rules and as you know, we've got 13 MMTCs, medical marijuana treatment centers. There's an RFP coming out soon, another 8. In the law that passed last year, there's a requirement that there's a diversity component of all of their these new applications, right? And existing MMTCs have to do as well, but they're not as motivated because there's a scoring requirement in the applications going forward. So in talking, I'm going to answer your question. We get a lot of calls from a lot of people who want to get into the space, right? You can apply for one of these medical marijuana treatment center licenses. It's reasonably expensive, I'm going to tell you that. As you know, you have a huge team, a lot of requirements. We can tell you how to do that, but it's not easy to penetrate the business model. But there are areas, and I was going to mention one before you brought this up. So all of these MMTCs have to have a diversity plan. That means a wide variety of different men, women, ethnic origins, etc. But there's really no staffing programs for these folks who are trying to hire people, right? I mean, if you could put together, you know, a business model that says we can provide any one of these people, knowledge, experience, meet some of these requirements, right? You train them, give them, you know, so they're certified employees, so to speak. I mean, that doesn't exist here anywhere in the state right now. So, as Pete talked about, I mean, unless rec comes along, if and when, right? Without a vertically integrated system, what we have now, which hopefully will change, it's very tough to get in. You can't, and these MNTCs cannot contract or subcontract for services. We're talking about security, we're talking about logistics, we're talking about, it's ridiculous, right? Because none of these people have all of those skill sets. So one of the things we talked about in the last session, one of the things we're gonna do is work on this legislation next year and change that. It's gonna be changed, it's not gonna be wide open, but it's gonna be changed in a way that makes sense to build the skill sets and the efficiencies, the effectiveness, so that they can really sell the product to a wide variety.
Can we help?
No, absolutely. So, and unless you guys wanna talk about